I want my space, I want my freedom. This is something we hear young people saying all the time. But the freedom we enjoy today did not come for free. There's a certain price that was paid for it. Now, as we celebrate 8 decades of India's independence on 15th August 2026, how can we forget partition and the freedom struggle? Meet Kishwar Desai, the driving force behind Partition Museum, an institution that tells history not just through dates and political milestones, but through the eyes, through the memories, through the possessions and the lived experiences of people who have endured 1947 partition. So Kishwar, I want to commend you first of all on your initiative to bring about the Partition Museum. I mean, it does pique my interest as to what actually led you to create this museum. Why did you think that India needed a Partition Museum at this point of time?
Thank you so much, Namrata, for your kind words. I do need to point out that the museum, the first museum in the world that we set up, or I sort of initiated, was actually 10 years ago on the 70th anniversary of India's partition. And the reason, as you and I know, I mean, it was so blatant and so clear to all of us that India needed such a museum, in a sense that the whole world, wherever you go, you have the Apartheid Museum, you have the Holocaust Museum, you have the Black History Museum, you have the Hiroshima Memorial, all the difficult moments of a nation's history are recorded in these places which are called sites of conscience. These are sites or museums where you go which are very different to other museums. They make you wake up and realize that all of us have a role to play in nation building, and therefore we must not forget all the problems which our nation has faced while it has reached where it has reached today. So I think in 2017, I was very keen that we give ourselves a deadline. But I had started work on this probably mentally many years prior to that, because my parents were of the partition generation. They had both come as from Pakistan, what is now Pakistan, as refugees. They were both in Lahore. They didn't know each other at that time. My mother was just a young girl at 13. My father was around 23. He was studying in Government College, Lahore. But they both had to leave overnight. And my maternal grandparents came with nothing. Like so many stories we heard in those days and later on, but these stories were never recorded. They were never part of our national consciousness, never part of our collective memory. And you know, when we talk about tangible and intangible heritage, this was an intangible heritage, but it was also a very sad moment for all of us that even after 70 years, when we set up the first museum, there wasn't even a memorial, there wasn't even a space, there was nowhere in the country or the world where that generation and their children could go and say, look what happened to us. Over 20 million were displaced overnight. It was like they were told to just leave their homes and go away, and they were forgotten. And their sacrifice was never recorded. So many children grew up without knowing their parents' or their grandparents' history. So it was very important. I also studied here in school and in college, and no one ever discussed the partition. So it was something that pained me to see what my parents had gone through, what their friends had gone through, what their generation had gone through. And you know, they were an amazing generation. They went through so much, and yet they never complained. They never once, I still get goosebumps when I talk about it, because they never once were bitter. They said, we did it for our country. Just like the freedom fighters did so much for their country. They left their homes, they left everything, they left their belongings, because they believed that they were going to build a new nation. And indeed, many of them became nation builders. So therefore, I thought about this maybe about 25 years ago. At that time, I was still working in television, and everybody dissuaded me and said that, how will you make a museum? You know, it was unheard of. Ke aap ek din khade ho jao, bolo, I want to make a museum. So they said, you do digital stuff. So I said, no, I don't want to do digital stuff. At that time, anyway, digitization was not as popular as it is today. So I wanted a physical museum. I wanted a physical space where people could go and share each other's grief and pain. You know, that's
Yeah,
very important.
and shared they did. In fact, you call it a people's museum.
Yes.
It has, you know, somewhere some old books, some photographs, some old trunks. So tell us about that engagement, if I may put it that way, with the people, by the people, for the people.
For the people.
And any interesting, you know, possession which kind of struck a chord with you, and you know, you still remember it. As somebody's contribution towards documenting that part of history, painful that it may have been.
And Namrata, though today we run 2 museums, aajkal everybody talks about the partition.
Yeah.
In fact, with it's great that even the Prime Minister has appointed a day, that is the 14th of August, as Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. So these things, these moments are very important in our history. But when we started out, which again I go back to, you know, about 15 years ago when I first started talking about it. In 25 I was dissuaded, 25 years ago I was dissuaded. But when I started talking about it again in 2014, 2015, 2016, especially after I think the new government came to power, when I started talking about it, I found that people were not as dismissive as they had been previously. Okay. They were willing to listen to me, that we need this narrative, we need to know what happened, we need to document everything before it's too late, because already 70 saal to hone wale the. So those people who were young at that time were already, like my parents, were already in their 90s and 80s, and they would be passing on very soon. So if we didn't document, ये पूरी history खत्म हो जाती, because this is, as you said, a people's history. So right from the beginning, when we started talking to various people, including the government, though they were supportive, but very few people understood what we wanted to do. They could not sort of visualize कि Partition Museum में होगा क्या, क्या आप दिखाओगे, कैसे आप बताओगे story. So this, luckily, because I'm a writer, I'm an author, and I'd worked in television, so I could visualize. So therefore हमने visualization पूरा शुरू किया कि जब लोग आएंगे, when they come to the museum, what is it that they will see? And then we started working on the whole concept. But Namrata, it took a lot of doing, because though people were supportive, but there was also a lot of opposition. Why do you want to do this? You know, why do you want to rake up old wounds? Why do you want to talk about some difficult moments? Let's talk about happy things. So I said, you cannot talk about happy things unless you remember the sad moments. And unless you know what your history is, you will continue to repeat it over and over again. This is actually a museum of love, a museum of peace. It's a museum where we want people to visit, but to come out saying this must never happen again. These kind of divide and rule policies must not be there. The country must live in harmony and happiness, which is what we are saying today also, that the diversity is what we should appreciate and enjoy. So those are the messages of the museum. But when I started, as I said, in 2014, 2015, 2016, I had no money. We had no money at all, and I come from a middle class family. Even though, yes, I was married to a parliamentarian in the UK, but the UK parliamentarians are not like the Indian parliamentarians. They are very normal people. My husband was a professor, so it wasn't like we had a lot of money or anything, but we had a lot of dedication and interest in what we were doing. So I came here and I set up a trust, and I said we would like to encourage people to donate towards this, because if the government is saying at that time, whichever, not the national government that I was talking to, I was talking to state governments, various places like in Delhi and in Amritsar, कि अगर मुझे कहीं पे जगह मिल जाए. So Sardar Prakash Singh Badal was very interested in the concept, and he also said, बीबी तुसी नहीं करोगे तो असी कर लांगे, पर मेरे कोल पैसे नहीं हैगे. So I can give you a building. I can even give you the land. He was very interested in museums, and he said, I can even give you the land, but I don't have any money. You have to make the museum yourself. And I think this was the area where I started really getting worried, But then I thought of the partition survivors and all those who had crossed the border with nothing and then who grew to become nation builders. They set up industries, they became, heads of companies, they joined the government. So I said, if they could do it, if they could rise from the dust, why can't we? When they showed us the town hall, Namrata, very different to what it is today, it was a complete ruin. The roof had disappeared. There were people living inside the building. हर जगह पे dust, गंदगी, मट्टी, ये वो, but we took it because we said that, look, again, same concept, partition survivors could do it. We can also, if we work hard, we can somehow get it done. So the government said that let's restore this for you. We'll restore it and give it to you, bare minimum. After that, you have to do everything. So that gave us around 6 months of time to start putting things together, to start raising the money, to start talking to people. Where I became very lucky and fortunate was that a lot of young people were interested in that concept.
I was also wondering that somebody who's born in 2005, 2010 might think, what is the relevance of a partition museum when we were not even there? But as Indians, how much do we know how to live with pain and, to reconcile, sit down with that pain, reconcile with that pain? Is that something which is very important? And everyone from the political machinery to down to the layperson, we try to struck things under the carpet to a great extent. Agree or disagree?
It was brushed under the carpet, but there were many like my parents and many of their friends who frankly felt relieved that at least somebody was asking them.
Okay.
That what had they experienced? What had they gone through?
And the young also, the old and the young.
And the young were the ones who were now coming. For example, I didn't do the interview of my parents. I asked somebody else to do it. Since I had a background in television, I had a small camera in the house. We had no money. So I used to go out and do all the interviews myself. And I was really, really, you can use the word blown away with the kind of narratives I found. And these were not just narratives of violence. These were also narratives of people helping each other, the bravery they showed, the courage they demonstrated, the kind of things they saw as a young child. This was living history, which was being unfolded in front of my eyes through these eyewitness accounts, which, Namrata, had not been recorded.
And the worst tends to get out the best out of people.
Yeah, and they had been hidden under the carpet for 2 reasons. I'll tell you, not just because people didn't want to talk about it, but people like my parents and grandparents, when they crossed the border, you must remember this was a new country. It was absolutely brand new. The government was new. Nobody could say what was going to happen the next day because it had just got its independence and its freedom. So all the systems and institutions were just being established. People were scrambling around ki naukri chahiye, ghar chahiye. They came with nothing. 20 million uprooted overnight. You can imagine किस तरह दिल्ली का जो हाल था. अभी हम जब मैं गई to do my documentation, let me tell you, I went and saw albums which had never been opened. I went to the archives and picked up files which had never even been seen. And even when I went to the British archives, they told me, you are the first person who's asked for these documents and these photographs. उससे पहले किसने देखा ही नहीं था. इतना सारा उनके साथ. So to go to the people and talk to them, not just my own parents, but others were also in tears, the elderly. They would cry because, for example, I will tell you that I did this story with, I recorded it myself, this gentleman his family used to live in Rawalpindi. And he was old enough to remember because he was in his 90s when I recorded him about 10 years ago. And his mother and all the female members of the family, because Rawalpindi was one of the first to encounter the riots. So everyone there was very worried because the women were being abducted and raped and there were so many incidents just taking place everywhere. So they didn't know what to do with the women because they thought that agar inko saath mein le jayenge to they might just, something terrible will happen. So they built a big bonfire and all the women were asked to jump into it.
Oh my God.
So
I was about to ask you how women experience
it
partition.
Was horrible. It was to listen to this gentleman. He had barely, he didn't talk about it very much because he said that not many people are interested in my story. But then he started talking and the tears were just rolling down his cheeks. He said, "Main haath chhura ke bhag gaya." And he said, "My mother burnt to death."
So many of these people would be now in their 90s. So for those who are tuning in and listening to what you were saying, is there any way in which they can perhaps reach out and share their possessions, their accounts, or is there a mechanism to also get more people in?
Well, you see, the first thing is, Namrata, the museums are public institutions. You know, we are not running a private archive online or something like that where it's difficult to do anything. You just come to the museum, write to the museum. There's one in Amritsar, there is one in Delhi. We've recently had a couple of, we've had lots of filmmakers who have come to us and taken the narratives. But recently, very publicly, we've had the Imtiaz Ali film coming out, Main Wapas Aunga, and then Batwara 1947. Now, these film stars and producers have visited our museums publicly and they have talked about it. So a lot of people already know it's all out there in the open. We want you to reach out. I'm just reaching out now directly to whoever has a narrative that we may not have recorded, who has some objects or documents or photographs from that period which may not be in the museum. Please do reach out to us because the Partition Museum in Amritsar, it's online, you can get the address. Even the Partition Museum in Delhi, you can get the address, it's at Kashmiri Gate, and you can write to us directly, you can come to the museum with your objects. That was the other thing that happened, because when I was doing the initial outreach programs, ek to humne wo conference ki, in which we got this great response, because without doing that, you don't even know whether there is a need for a museum. But that was a big affirmative, affirmation that we got from the audience and from the youth. Because see, we are not, जो आप सवाल पूछ रहे हो कि जो 90s में हैं और उस समय 80s में थे, many of them, Namrata, have now gone. Right. I recently again revisited the Partition Museum. I'm the chair and founder, of course, but it now has managers and it runs on its own. So we still do it in the same way. We still raise money, पैसे इकट्ठे करते हैं, salaries देते हैं. We don't take any money from the government. It's all through donations. तो जो वहाँ, because it's a people's museum, so we wanted to keep that, retain that concept.
That's very nice.
So जब लोग उधर जाते हैं, they do contact our managers and say that yes, we have something that we would like to share, and that is how the museum collections continue to grow, and hopefully soon we should be able to add more to the collections both in Amritsar as well as in Delhi. But I do want to say that the need for these museums has not been reduced in any way. And when I walk around that museum, I am, overwhelmed. I feel very blessed because a lot of that, we started it in time. Because a lot of the people, we have these large monitors which are playing throughout in every gallery. We have excerpts from various interviews which we have done. And जो भी वहाँ पे हैं, many of them are no more. So when you walk around, you feel like you're, जैसे जो हमारे पूर्वज थे ना, like our ancestors,
they are blessing.
Are talking to us from the past, because they're no more, including my own father. My mother's still there, but she's had a stroke, so she can't talk to us. But इतने सारे जो हमने recordings की हैं, वो लोग अब है ही नहीं. तो जब मैं जाती हूँ उधर, मुझे इतना, I feel like, I'm in another world altogether, and people are communicating to me, not through AI, but luckily through their real voices, their real experiences, and what they had been through. So it was a timely thing which we did.
I'm sure it was. And I think what I can read is, your ability as a articulate speaker, as a storyteller, as a narrative builder. You've had some background in television. That also did set a ground for eliciting interest from the youth, from different people. But I want to also focus on your husband, the late Lord Meghnad Desai, and he spent a lifetime talking about India, the politics, the economics from that lens, and you from a different lens of history and through the lived experiences of people. What was his support? Did he agree or disagree on certain aspects of how to create this museum? Was he also equally a force behind it?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, because as you know, he's no more. He passed away last year, and we all truly miss him because he was a great personality. And having been a professor and a teacher his entire life, of course he was a parliamentarian, but primarily he was always a teacher, and that side never left him as a professor. So he was always enthusiastic, not just with me, but with other people and their proposals. I cannot tell you, Namrata, how many people he has helped, or he had helped all over the world set up institutions, become their best, do their best in every way. They became prime ministers, presidents. I mean, I was told that once he went to the World Bank and IMF, and they asked that anybody who was a student of Lord Desai, could you just step forward? And they said so many people came forward.
Everybody stood up.
Everybody, like the rooms were just full of people who had studied. And he, obviously being a professor, you don't remember each and every name, but they remembered him. Okay. So I think his enthusiasm, not just for seeing a better world, for seeing a better India, for seeing human beings that lived with love and compassion, this was something which is very dear to his heart.
So on 15th August 1947, like they say, India woke up to freedom, but many Indians woke up to a life without homes. And that's why this fetish for real estate, apne upar chhat, that is there. So you think a lot of our cultural sentiments traces back to partition and to pre-independence era?
Firstly, let me say that it's a myth that they woke up on 15th August to find that they didn't have homes. The actual partition, the British were very clever. They announced, they made it a policy that first they would give Pakistan independence, then they would give 15th of August, give us independence, and the terms of partition were only announced on the 17th of August. So till the 17th of August, people actually didn't know whether they were going to be in India or Pakistan, especially those that lived in Bengal and Punjab. And therefore, many people actually, Namrata, were told that Lahore was going to be part of India. And we have advertisements that were brought out and published in newspapers that ghar kharido, ye karo. So a lot of people who then had to move to India actually bought homes just before partition in Lahore, thinking कि ये इधर. Similarly, इस तरह की 3-4 और भी किस्से हैं which happened in Bengal. Because people were very confused. Unless you were part of the government and you were close to the British or to the powers that be, nobody else really knew what was going to happen, because 15th को सिर्फ independence के जश्न हो रहे थे. 17th को was the actual terms of which part of which country is this certain place going to be or not be. That was when it was actually announced. Now to talk about how it impacted us in the long term. Recent studies have shown that the Holocaust survivors, whether they and their families, whether people actually saw the Holocaust, experienced the Holocaust or not, but future generations, जो उनके बच्चे हैं, बच्चों के बच्चे हैं, they carry the scars and the memories, whether they actually experienced it or not.
True.
This was, it's a scar, which is like a mental kind of a scar. Even I think perhaps it has impacted even our DNA. So this is something which I also learned as I was going forward, and people of my, my children's generation, and, even further down, they were all so interested in partition, especially if they had member of their family who had gone through it. So itna interest ऐसे नहीं आता है. There has been some kind of a genetic transfer, I would say, of those memories to us. Why do we feel so nostalgic for places that we've never been?
So Kishwar, now we get into some quick fire questions. Whatever is your instinctive response, you can just tell me. What would you say to your naysayers who say, let bygones be gones?
Let bygones
Be gones.
Okay. I think that's the policy I believe anyway. Let bygones be bygones, because I don't want to live with any kind of resentment.
Okay.
And the whole idea of these museums was just that they should not be any kind of bitterness. We should live in peace and harmony. And that's what the museums are all about.
Can remembering trauma help in reconciliation? Yes or no?
Yes.
It can. One partition story you feel that everyone should know?
I can never pinpoint just one, but I think one which is truly interesting is about these twin brothers who, one has grown up in Pakistan, one has grown up in India.
Okay.
And you know, it is such a strange story and yet the bonds remain, you know. So it is actually, it is the narrative of our countries, that we all live together as brothers, as sisters, or whatever it is. And one fine day we were divided. So for me, that is almost an allegory of India and Pakistan.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example.
We were born at the same time, the two countries in their present shape.
Any misconception about partition you'd like to correct? You, of course, corrected one about 15th August, the whole uncertainty of not knowing anything till 17th August. But any other misconception about freedom struggle or partition that you also that cleared some cobwebs in your mind as well whilst you were researching this?
See, I think what is very important to remember is that the communities lived peacefully together. This we must remember, because it was the British policy to divide and rule. And I'll tell you how I discovered this for myself, because I did a whole book on Jallianwala Bagh, and which happened just 30 years before partition. It was in 1919, Jallianwala Bagh took place in Amritsar. It's the same Amritsar that also saw the burning of homes in 1947 during partition. But in 1919, the Hindus and Muslims were fighting the British together. And it is a documented proof, because you know, the heads of the revolution in 1919 against the Rowlatt Act, one was a Hindu, one was a Muslim, and they walked through the streets of Amritsar together celebrating Ram Navami. गुरुद्वारों में जाते थे, मस्जिद में इकट्ठे जाते थे, temples में इकट्ठे जाते थे. The communities used to celebrate everything, and it's all documented how the British were getting very agitated about this, and they kept saying कि हमें इसको किसी तरह ये unity की तोड़नी है. So it's a myth which was created. Divide and rule.
Divide and rule was a, and basically communities were in harmony.
They were in harmony.
Yeah. One leader whom you wish, you know, whose oral history you wish you had recorded. Anybody like that? Or
I think one can never ever not want to know from Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi.
What do you think the generation who lived through partition understood about freedom that perhaps we may not appreciate?
I think ab mujhe rula doge, because I definitely feel कि मेरे पेरेंट्स की जो जनरेशन थी, उनके जो सपने थे और उनकी जो ख्वाहिशें थी, हम बहुत पीछे रह गए. You know, like what all they sacrificed and what all they gave up.
Yeah, the idealism, that is
the idealism is somewhere missing. We are more into into our cell phones and things like that, and I think this India really needs to remember them. Tomorrow, 14th, 15th, 16th, these are very crucial days to remember कि उनके साथ, because this was around the time when my grandparents were forced to leave Lahore. तो ये sacrifices अगर हम आज भूल जाएंगे तो फिर हमारा कुछ नहीं बनेगा.
So one lesson from 1947 for today's India, which you think is the biggest takeaway for today's India?
I think that is obvious. There should never be any divide and rule. All communities must live in harmony and peace. And that is why in both the museums, in Amritsar and in Delhi, we have created, the last gallery is the Gallery of Hope. जहाँ पे हम जैसे अमृतसर का आप एग्जाम्पल ले लो, वहाँ पे हमने एक पेड़ बनवाया है which is made of barbed wire, है ना, और उसके ऊपर हम हरे पत्ते टांगते हैं to make it green again, कि ये हमारे दिल में जो कड़वाहट है वो सब कुछ ख़त्म कर दो और हरा भरा एक देश बनाओ, you know, like let's not. So I think the biggest takeaway, and even here it's the same thing, because हमें अपने दिलों में एक दूसरे के लिए इज्जत, respect is very important. Respect each other's culture, respect each other's language, each other's dress, gender, whatever, you know, whoever that person is, you must be able to respect them and give them the full opportunity to come up to their best, no matter what you do. अब मैंने तो अपने छोटी सी वो whatever I could do, this was my giving back to the nation. It's a wonderful country, and I thought that by setting up these two museums, I could give back the debt I owe to this nation, because after all इधर ही मैं बड़ी हुई हूँ, इधर ही सब कुछ सीखा है, तो each one of us must give back in some way. So this is my small way, by putting together these two museums, of giving back to the country that I love so much.
Yeah. As AI grips the world, I think we as a country are becoming much more interested in our history, and people like Kishwar Desai, when they give back to the nation what they call as Matri Rin, I think it's creating impact not just for one generation, but for many generations of Indians. Kudos to your efforts, to your spirit, to the resilience of overcoming a million challenges before you could set up this mammoth institution, one which is not just physical but is also metaphorical in many ways. Thank you so much for sharing a part of you and you know, your heart and your labor of love with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Namrata.